From that perspective, I'm thinking about how my students will show up if they are coming in a triggered, heightened, altered brain state. It makes me wonder how empathetic I am set up to be that day. What co-regulating tools do I have to support students, regardless of the side of the bed they woke up on or the experiences that they had on their way to school? Hey community, I'm Jocelyn Reed, your host, mother, sister, friend, educator, coach, and lifelong learner. A super fan of a loving, curious, chocolate-obsessed kid named Zaire and our giant chocolate Labradoodle puppy named Hershey. Yep, chocolate is a big old deal over here. Let's have some fun, discover some new ideas and concepts, plant those seeds for the future, and figure out how to nurture relationships with our kids and students. Keeping the bigger picture in mind, we don't teach students for the classroom. We teach them for when they leave it. We don't parent kids for the home, but to leave it. Rootwords is here to help you have those conversations that are required to prepare them for the challenges and opportunities they are guaranteed in the spaces they choose to grow up and occupy. So let's do this together, one word at a time. Let's go.
You are listening to Rootwords, the podcast presented by Revolve Learning.
The definition of imperfect is not perfect, faulty, still in progress, or lacking completion. When we empower all the parts of us, even those parts that are self-proclaimed imperfect, that has the power to affect how we see the world, the environments, and the relationships all around us. There is a deep level of reflection that has to take place and continue to take place to be truly accepting of yourself, your process, your progress, which is your journey. Okay, story time. I got up on the wrong side of the bed. Let me explain. When I was thinking about whether I wanted to share this story, I thought about the interpretation of my life from others. When you're in a position to where you're speaking with thousands of educators, right? You're doing these professional development sessions, you're connecting with people. It often can seem like, you get the highlight reels. And I know a lot of educators assume that I never had a bad day teaching or assume that it was always super easy to connect with students and build relationships and all of the things that I have mastered facilitating about and talking about. Because I was successful in many ways in the classroom, but I didn't always get it right. I didn't always feel like doing it. I didn't always, do the right thing. And there's a lot that goes into that. And because of that is why I want to share this story to kind of err on the side of humanizing humanity in how you teach and how you show up for the kids around you. So, like I said, I got up on the wrong side of the bed and it made me wonder, have you considered the dreams and nightmares of your students and how they impact their learning on your classroom? So, keeping it real, I woke up like this does not happen like this for everybody. For most of us, right? We don't always wake up, arms stretched to the skies, big, refreshed, yawn, smile, like we see in the commercials, insert magical sounding rooster sunshine wake up. So I have a natural rhythm of sleep, regardless of how late I stay up. I pretty much always wake up around the same time, around 6:30 or so these days. Now, I realize that when I naturally wake up at 6:30, if I pull an audible and go, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and get some more sleep, I'm going to sleep in, then my brain goes into a mode where I have extremely vivid dreams when I go back to sleep in the morning. So sometimes they can be awesome dreams. Sometimes they can be very strange. Sometimes they can be full out triggering. And this morning I had one that brought up some past moments where I felt violated in major ways. Now, because of what I know about the brain science, the neuroscience, and because I am an educator, of course, I'm going to make that connection to that because when I woke up from that dream that was extremely triggering, I know that usually I remember every single little detail because it was so jarring and because I am now waking up in a state of fight, flight, or freeze, and my brain and body has just been rushed with cortisol. And what we know about that is when that happens, we have a physical response. And I feel it in my body because I am being locked in to that state. My amygdala is on fire and the rest of my brain is following suit. So even after I wake up, I'm constantly rewinding and replaying and reviewing all the details of that dream as I'm getting ready, as I'm getting dressed, as I'm brushing my teeth. I am literally replaying those details of the dream, trying to understand it, trying to calm myself down, beating myself up because I'm now waking up in a non-ideal state. And crazy enough, my eyes actually usually are very swollen and I'm just super groggy, like drained, totally drained. I just got a full night's sleep, technically, but I feel drained. My feet feel like bricks. I'm no longer springing into the day. I'm not sprightly. I'm very, very low energy. And so it makes me think of students who do not have control over their sleep patterns or their environments. But oftentimes, because of our school system and the rigid structures of our schedules, students are not able to wake up naturally and transition into a space where they feel their best sometimes. Honestly, they're just trying to get through it. They sometimes don't have the opportunity to talk it out, to be helped through it, or to shift out of it. So their whole day can be totally shifted because of a bad dream or nightmare. Like, this blew my mind when I thought about it this morning because I'm like, whoa, this is how I feel as an adult with the tools, skills, and mindset to work through it and actually be productive today. What about the kids who have not yet learned the skills and the mindsets to be successful through what they feel because of what their brain and body did while they were asleep? What? We got to talk about this. As a teacher, if I don't have the skills and mindsets, even as an adult, it would totally show up in how I teach that day. Right now, I'm a business owner. I don't have the immediate responsibility to be in front of kids. But if I had to head into the classroom in that state, I'm not feeling it. I am not feeling it. When my brain is in this state, when I wake up, I don't want to work out. I don't want to meditate. I don't want to eat a healthy breakfast. All things that I know fuels the rest of my day. I reach for coffee, and that barely gives me enough energy. And then, when it does, it usually crashes. That is the power of cortisol in the body. It can't easily be masked, it can't easily be lifted. So, shout out to those that are directly in front of kids right now every day because these days happen. But from that perspective, I'm thinking about how my students will show up if they are coming in a triggered, heightened, altered brain state. It makes me wonder how empathetic I am set up to be that day. What co-regulating tools do I have to support students, regardless of the side of the bed they woke up on or the experiences that they had on their way to school? So think about it. They may have already engaged with several people who weren't co-regulating with them, just kind of shooing them to their destination because they have to get to work. They might have encountered a school leader or another adult in the hallway that just hurried them along to class, really not noticing them because, perhaps only the personal relationships like between teacher and student would be able to really tell and notice that they're a little off from a norm day for them. Other questions I have is like, what do I have in place for students to help give them a runway of learning, of class culture, of a sense of belonging? Are my expectations that they are perfect when they come in and that they follow my perfect schedule and that they participate in the same high energy, fully engaged way every day, every morning? Does that make sense? And is that fair right now, even for myself, knowing how I feel right now, with the acceptance of imperfection, we also have a need for grace and flexibility. So, I teach the science of learning and development and the simple brain science that every educator just must know. But before all that, the first time I really heard about the brain science was in the book Gifts of Imperfections by Brené Brown, where she talked about how we are just straight up hardwired for connection. Now, I teach that concept through even more in-depth science skills and mindsets, but that book really changed the game in helping me realize some deep rooted shame and guilt that I have been carrying around with me because of some real traumatic events I lived through in my teenage years and my early 20s, but also the unrealistic expectations I was putting on those I cared about to put their shame and guilt down and perform to a level of perfect that I was placing on them. And that is including my students. I can honestly say I don't think I have fully loved my job as a teacher or my life really in general until I put down the burden of shame and unpacked how I was going to live wholeheartedly. It also shined a new light on my students, and I was much more open to considering their context once I faced my own. So let's unpack a little bit about the concept of being perfect in an education setting, right? We all know what the quote unquote perfect student would do in our minds, like how that student responds, participates, and acts. Every teacher has a moment where they sort of envision what that would look like, the perfect student. How do I know this? Because we lesson plan. And usually in those moments, we think about it going perfectly, especially if we are being observed. So as we're planning out the questioning that we're going to ask, you best believe we are envisioning what the student response will be. The perfect student responses will be. How will that go? Here's where the game changer is, because if we consider all that comes with our students, there is likely a ton behind how they perform in the classroom and what may be deemed by some to be imperfect classroom moments where students are acting differently than you envisioned. What are you going to do then? We can reframe our thinking to consider the opportunity behind every behavior, not just ideal behaviors. So like I said, The Gifts of Imperfections by Brené Brown was so impactful. And the main three factors that she mentioned was courage, compassion, and connection as being the vehicles for living that wholehearted life. And with that, she also mentions 10 guideposts for how you can live it out well. So I want to shift and just talk a little bit about those three factors and from an education perspective. Now, the first one being courage. And I've talked about courage in the last season. If you haven't checked that out, go back and check out that episode on being a courageous educator, because it kind of goes along with what I learned. And I think it had a lot to do because I read this book is why I think about courage in this way. Now, we all have like veteran teachers or school leaders in our buildings. We all have friends and neighbors and people that we talk to. Now, if those people shift your dynamic nature of what you bring to the table of education, to your learning spaces, to your classrooms, if those people are more interested in what you are doing to one up you than to build together and build in community, we have to let that go. And that's one of the guideposts, letting go of what people think. And also letting go of perfectionism is also a guidepost. It's probably not going to go exactly as you planned anyway. Like when you're lesson planning, when you're getting observed, whatever, embrace the ebbs and flow as a part of the lesson. Expect that. Expect that that's going to be the best part of your lesson, matter of fact. Because usually that's when real magic happens. Students make connections to the lessons in ways that you could have never imagined Why? Because you're not their years old. You're not however your students old, however old they are, you're not that. And so your brain cannot think as an 8-year-old would think about it. So you can only take it but so far. When you give them the opportunity to kind of ping it back to you and ping it back to their classmates, that's when you can really build on what's best for your students at exactly the level that they need. Only you know how to do that because you know your students the best. So think, what do I need right now, regardless of what the world says or says I should do or need to do? Do what's best. We let go of perfectionism. We letting go of what people think. We're also letting go of that numbing powerlessness. You have a great amount of power because of your knowledge, your skill sets, and what you bring to the table every day through relationships. And you know relationships aren't perfect. They are the most imperfect things because it's always going to be more than one person trying to move and connect in one way. And that one way is together. And so it's never going to be absolute perfection for anybody, but it could be wildly beneficial for everyone when we leverage and prioritize how we're going to work together for the collective good. Now, when we're working with people and when we're thinking about our own purpose, we also have to let go of scarcity and the fear of the dark, which is another guidepost. Part of embracing imperfection is about letting ourselves know and reminding ourselves and our students that what is here for you will be enough. And there will be enough kindness, patience, and love for you to get through what you are going through. You deserve it. You are worth the effort and support, and you will move through your darkest moments in relationship with those that straight up have your back. Think about it. What if every student knew that? What if every student knew about the other side of their darkest moments because they have you in it? Those moments can be really, really lonely. But just like I had that moment earlier today where I'm just not feeling it, I think if I was a student and I had a teacher that intentionally gave me runways through my darkest moments, how much better I'd be for it. Maybe as an adult right now, I wouldn't be having nightmares about those moments now. Next is compassion. Now, this is where we are letting go of the need for absolute certainty, the need of 100% knowing how people will react, 100% knowing how an outcome of our efforts will turn out for us, letting go of comparison, letting go of exhaustion as our status symbol for productivity and self-worth. That is a huge one. And another guidepost that I believe falls under compassion is letting go of anxiety as a lifestyle. So this is how all that ties in, and I'll use my story for example, right? If I am being compassionate with myself, showing myself compassion, knowing that I woke up in a less ideal state than I wanted to, right? If I let go of that, then I also am letting go of my need of absolute certainty that I will cross off every box today. I will let go of me comparing myself to other entrepreneurs and their productivity because they are not me and they didn't wake up how I woke up. I also am going to let go of exhaustion as my status symbol because I'm not going to push myself beyond my means, which will impact me physically, mentally, emotionally, just to be seen as productive because that is what people say is the highest of the self-worth. And this is hugely impactful in education and in classrooms because when we are prioritizing productivity over wellness and our classrooms has to be seen as go, 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 they're constantly doing this. When students have this whole contextual background to bring alongside them, depending on their environments, their relationships, and their experiences, like me, I might not be my best, and pushing productivity on me today would not produce the best outcomes. for our relationships, if I had a teacher that was pushing me into productivity right now, it would not produce lasting outcomes, lasting positive outcomes that we want. Between teachers and students, that's the only way that we get academic gains. It doesn't build trust when you have someone pushing you outside of what you actually need in that moment. And you need to be attuned and responsive as an educator to even see this in your students, to know when to push, to know when to pull, to know when to press pause. The last component that Brene talked about was connection. When we are rooted in connection, we recognize more in others. That made me think this vision of a teacher teaching and people coming in to see this teacher, and this teacher being in a pause moment because her students truly needed that in order to proceed. And that might not look the coolest. It might not look like your classroom is on point how it usually is when you need to conference with one or two students in a moment because they are snowballing. And you see that snowball when it's a snowflake. And you can move accordingly because you know how much it would impact the entire classroom if those snowflakes became snowballs or became huge boulders of ice. We let go of all of these preconceived notions of what is supposed to happen or how someone is supposed to react, and we can just be and we can support each other. When our brains and bodies are being flushed with cortisol, we can connect with each other and counteract that with oxytocin and other hormones of love. And we really, truly need that in order to learn. It takes a keen mindset shift in order to position yourself to do that. All right, let's see what Zai has to say about the concept of being imperfect.
All right, it's Zai time.
Welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Awesome. So today for this episode, we have been talking all about what it means to be imperfect. When you hear the word imperfect, what comes to mind?
To me, it feels like the opposite of perfect.
What's important to understand as a kid?
I think it's important to understand that you won't always be perfect. Like, no one is ever perfect.
In the moments where you feel like you're not perfect, what helps to support you in those moments?
You and Hershey.
You're gonna say me and Hershey for every episode?
I mean, yeah, you guys are mainly the ones that give me comfort.
Okay, so what about it when I'm not around, when Hershey's not around, you realize that you're not perfect? Well, what is something that you do right now that's like you're working through? You're not perfect at it. You're definitely imperfect, but it's something that you enjoy doing and you're learning. Now, this all comes under that umbrella of classroom behaviors that can be distracting from you or your students from truly absorbing and engaging with your lessons. But you see how it's a mindset? How open are you to truly understanding and being compassionate about having courage to do what might not be totally on paper as the right, proper thing to do, and leaning in the area of connection in order to propel your classroom forward?
It would definitely be coding and playing video games.
So yeah, okay, so you're not perfect in that. It's a learning curve is what I like to say. It's like you have to actually work through it a little bit, get better at it over time. So what are some things that you tell yourself? It's like this is like self-talk. What are some things you tell yourself in the moment when you're in the learning process?
I tell myself to try my best and push as hard as I can.
What does it mean to push as hard as you can?
It means like don't give up and just keep moving forward with whatever you're doing.
Gotcha. And now, what advice would you tell a friend or encourage a friend with who is having a hard time not being perfect?
I would tell them that no one is perfect, and whatever happened, like I would just tell them to try their best.
How did you learn that it's okay to be imperfect?
I think I learned from you guys, cause how you do all your edits and stuff. Like like just earlier today, you were doing a video, and it wasn't perfect. It was good though, really good.
Yeah, that was interesting, right? So I showed you how I worked with some of my imperfections and how I, persevered through that. So I think it's important for like grown-ups to share moments where things aren't going as totally as planned and you're not really feeling it all the time. And how we work through that is really important because it helps you see that, like, oh, I can be in your shoes. We talked about that last time, right?
Yeah.
I can be in your shoes and I can not feel it too. And then what am I going to do about that?
Well, some people just decide to try and be perfect. But no matter what, you won't be perfect. Everyone is almost the same.
Everyone's the same?
I said everyone's almost the same.
Almost the same? What do you mean by that?
That, because no one's perfect.
Oh, so we're all alike in the fact that none of us are perfect?
Yeah.
That's I got you. That's really interesting. One thing that I talk to teachers about a lot is finding the gift inside of a moment where there's been a mistake, right? Because some of the greatest inventions have happened from when a mistake was made and then they discovered something new and unexpected, right?
Right.
What do you think about that?
I think that you, like most people say, you learn from your mistakes. That's technically what just happened. Like something new and amazing that just happened from your mistake. I think that's what it means.
It also builds on what we talked about last episode in being your authentic self, right? So they kind of go hand in hand. You're your authentic self, but that authentic self is also imperfect, right? And that's okay. It is all about what makes you
authentic
and
imperfect
and
you.
Exactly. Okay, so what you'll find is that a lot of our episodes for this season, they build on each other. They're kind of nuances in a way, like you're being your authentic self, but it's also a nuance of that our authentic selves are also imperfect. All of that is okay, right? Sometimes we can find beauty in those imperfections, and it's all about what makes us us. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
Wow, it's always really great to hear, just from a kid's perspective, that reminder of you're not going to be perfect. It's going to be okay. Letting go of perfection for both you and your students could be the most impactful thing you do all school year. Trust is built in vulnerability, and we are usually quite imperfect in those vulnerable moments, or we're at least grappling with something that is giving us an urge to strive for perfection and holding us back from action at the same time. So accepting imperfections and being authentic that we talked about last episode, it goes hand in hand. Brené Brown said, authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It's about the choice to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, the choice to let our true selves be seen. Be imperfect. Take imperfect action. One of my favorite lines to tell myself when I'm battling with possibilities that can come from me taking imperfect action is that time stops for no one. Despite how nervous I am, this time will pass. And I will be on the other side of it regardless. So just do the best you can as time passes you by. Same for students. Tell your students you are meeting this moment with everything you have right now. Just do the best with it as you are, because that's not changing. The time will go on. Over time, you will change as a result of taking on this new experience. Good, bad, or indifferent, we have to ebb and flow with it. Staying still is not an option, because time just doesn't work that way. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining for another episode of Rootwords, presented by Revolve Learning. And we're not always going to feel like doing it, but you got this. Go after it. You can download the Questions to Connections guide for this episode to help you have those conversations about the concept of being imperfect with the kids in your life. If you are new here, head over, the link is in the bio, to check out our Path to Meaningful Connections resource, also available at revolvelearning.com. It'll help you warm up those relationships to be able to talk about some of the concepts that we talk about on the podcast, like being imperfect. Now, you can't just hop to talking about some of these concepts if you haven't built trust and if you haven't planted the seed to build the relationship and open up with your kids. If you found this podcast to be meaningful to you, screenshot it, tag us at Revolve Learning. We're on all social media platforms, or leave a review in the podcast platform wherever you're listening to us from. And I just truly want to thank you, and I appreciate you for tuning in. I'll catch you in the next one. Let's go.